What if I told you that in the middle of the deadliest desert in Africa, a man found a lion, so close to death it couldn't even lift its head? No roars, no fight left, just bones, sand, and silence. But what happened next defied every rule of nature, stunned scientists, and touched the hearts of millions. Because this isn't just an animal rescue. It's a story about breaking the line between fear and empathy, between instinct and choice, and maybe, just maybe, about how saving a wild animal can end up saving you. We live in a world that teaches us to stay away from danger, from pain, from anything that seems too broken to fix. But what if the wild has been trying to tell us something different all along? This story is not for the faint of heart. It's about survival. Trust, and a moment that could have gone horribly wrong, but didn't. And by the end, you won't look at lions or life the same way again. If stories like this move you, you might want to stick around. You'll feel right at home here. The sun in the Kalahari doesn't just burn, it crushes. Everything beneath it wilts, curls, or collapses. But on that particular afternoon, as heat shimmered off the cracked earth and wind whispered secrets through the tall, dry grass, one man walked where no one else dared. His name was Elias. Elias wasn't a scientist, a ranger, or part of any wildlife organization. He was just a man, a traveler who sought silence, redemption, or maybe something even he couldn't name. He had been crossing the edge of the desert for days, with only a rusted jeep, a half-empty canteen, and a vague sense that he needed to be out there, far from noise, far from people. That's when he saw it, a shape, slumped in the distance, like an abandoned thought. At first, he thought it was a mirage, a rock, maybe, or a memory. But as he stepped closer, his breath hitched. It was a lion, but not the kind you'd expect to see in documentaries. This animal didn't roar. It didn't move. Its ribs pushed through skin like broken piano keys, its mane brittle, patchy, barely clinging to its once majestic frame. Its eyes, half open, held that eerie stillness, not of death, but something far worse, the slow surrender to it. A lion, once the master of the savannah, reduced to a husk in the sand. Elias froze. He could hear the soft wheezing of the animal's breath, shallow, sporadic, as if each inhale was borrowed time. The desert around them fell silent, as if watching. Most would have turned back. There are certain things, after all, that we're taught not to touch. Wild animals, dangerous beasts, nature's rules. But Elias stepped forward, not recklessly, but with a calm that felt ancient, like somewhere deep inside. He'd already met this lion before in another life, another version of himself. Perhaps this wasn't a coincidence. Perhaps this was the story he didn't know he'd come to find. His eyes scanned the creature, desiccated tongue, cracked lips, twitching paws. It was more that exhaustion. It was the final chapter of something once glorious. And yet, even now, the lion didn't growl, didn't flinch. It simply watched him, blinking slow, trusting, somehow. Or maybe, too weak not to. But something passed between them in that moment, something unspoken. A tiny crack in the wall that separates species. Elias knew, without question, this animal had hours, maybe minutes, and no one else was coming. He turned to his jeep, heart pounding. He had water, a little food, not much, but maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The lion's life now hung in the space between hesitation and courage. And what Elias chose to do next would change everything. There's a kind of silence that falls right before you do something that might change your life. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of certainty. Elias stood still for a moment longer, his hand resting on the dented door of his jeep. His eyes kept flicking back to the lion, lying there like a forgotten statue sculpted by pain. Everything in him knew the rules. You don't approach a wild animal, especially not a predator, especially not when it's wounded, desperate, starving. But some moments don't ask for permission. They demand instinct. He grabbed a small bottle of water from his pack, still half full. He unscrewed the cap and stared at it. Every drop would matter, not just for the lion but for him too. Would the animal lash out? Did it still have the strength? His pulse raced. His palms were wet. With slow, deliberate steps, Elias walked back toward the animal, moving like a shadow, his body low, his breath held. The lion's head lifted barely an inch, Its eyes met his, no growl, no warning, just exhaustion, raw, unfiltered trust or indifference to fate. Kneeling beside it, Elias poured a small stream of water into a dented metal bowl he used for his own meals. He didn't dare get too close. He placed it carefully near the lion's head and backed off, slow and steady. The lion hesitated. Its tongue flicked. Then, with a trembling effort that seemed to shake its entire frame, the animal leaned forward and drank. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. But it was everything. It was a spark in a pitch-black void. Elias felt something shift inside him, a quiet cracking open. This wasn't just about rescue anymore. This was about dignity, about giving a dying creature the right to be seen, to be held in the presence of empathy, not fear. The next hour was a strange kind of dance. Elias offered bits of dry meat, his own rations. The lion sniffed them, then turned away. But the water kept disappearing, little by little, like hope crawling back into the animal's body. At one point, Elias whispered, "You're not done yet, are you?" And the lion blinked, slow and steady. Still no roar, still no signs of aggression. Just that breathless in-between state, somewhere between survival and surrender. He knew this was far from over. A single sip of water doesn't bring back a king, and the desert doesn't forgive easily. But something sacred had been exchanged in that quiet interaction. And deep down, Elias sensed this wasn't going to be a rescue in the traditional sense. It was going to be a commitment, a journey that would test more than his supplies. It would test his soul. Because sometimes, to save another life, you first have to step beyond the limits of your own. And as the last ray of sun slipped behind the dunes, a shadow moved behind them, silent, watching. This story was only beginning. By morning, the lion hadn't moved much. A few paw marks in the sand showed a failed attempt to rise, maybe during the night. But now, under the slow heat of a waking sun, he was still, his chest rising and falling, but barely. Elias crouched nearby, not too close, not too far. There's a fragile line between fear and trust, and he knew better than to force either. He poured fresh water into the same bowl, now sand-scratched and dented with use. This time, the lion didn't hesitate. He lifted his massive head with a groan that sounded more like wind through dry branches. One slow step, then another. He reached the bowl and began to drink, not desperately, not like an animal choking on thirst, but with presence, with restraint, as if, in that moment, he remembered who he was. Not a ghost of a king, but a king, still. And Elias watched with a quiet reverence that words can't hold. He wasn't looking at just an animal. He was witnessing a being reclaim a sliver of dignity. That sacred moment when survival turns into choice. The camera in Elias's hand shook slightly as he recorded. His breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. Viewers would later say the footage didn't look real, that the lion blinked like a man recalling a past life, that his expression held something closer to thank you than instinct, as if, somehow, this wild creature understood. Every sip the lion took felt like a vow. A silent pact between species. And then it happened. The most human gesture from the most untamed of creatures. After drinking, the lion turned his head, not away, not toward the food, but toward Elias. Just for a second. Long enough for their eyes to lock again. And Elias, this man hardened by solitude, by heat, by loss, felt his throat tighten. Because in that gaze, there was no rage, no suspicion, just an aching kind of peace. It was a look that said, "I see you." It's strange how connection can be forged in the smallest things. A bowl of water, a shared silence, a breath held between two heartbeats. But that moment, it shifted everything. Elias wasn't just feeding a starving animal anymore. He was witnessing a rebirth, a resurrection, not of the body but of spirit. The lion's body was still frail. His bones still pressed harshly against his skin. But his presence had changed. No longer a victim. Not yet a survivor, but something in between. A soul beginning to remember itself. And in the air hung a question neither of them could answer yet. Could he ever walk again? Could he run? Could he rule the land that nearly killed him? Elias didn't know. But something in the lion's eyes told him the story wasn't done, and neither of them was ready to let go. Time passed, but not in the way most people count it. Out there, in the vast emptiness of the Kalahari, days don't slip by with clocks or calendars. They stretch, They breathe. They bleed into each other like watercolor left too long in the sun. And in those blurred days, something quietly extraordinary began to unfold. The lion who Elias had started calling Tao, the Tswana word for lion, was no longer just surviving. He was healing. Each morning brought a subtle change. One day, it was the way Tao shifted his weight from one side to the other, testing his limbs. Another, it was the glint of recognition in his eyes when Elias approached with fresh meat. Once, Elias returned from a short drive to find the lion lying not where he'd left him, but a few feet away, drag marks in the sand revealing a determined, crawling journey. There was no triumph in these moments, only quiet perseverance. And yet, every step, every flick of the tail, felt like a miracle whispered rather than shouted. His fur, once dull and falling out in clumps, began to thicken. His ribs, once as defined as dry riverbeds, softened under new muscle. The animal was returning to himself not through force or medical intervention, but through something wilder, something ancient. Trust. That was the true medicine, because Elias didn't just feed him. He stayed. He watched. He spoke gently, told stories of his late wife, of the little farm he'd lost, of things that still kept him awake at night. And though Tao never responded in words, his presence grew louder with each day. The lion was listening, and as he grew stronger, the desert seemed to bend with him. Vultures stopped circling overhead. The jackals no longer crept too close. Even the wind shifted from hollow moans to something almost melodic. The wildlife around them responded, not with fear, but curiosity. Then came the morning Elias would never forget. He was pouring water, back turned, humming a tune he hadn't sung in years. And suddenly, a sound broke the air, not a growl, not a roar, but the unmistakable thud of massive paws hitting dry ground. He spun around. Tao was standing, not fully steady, not for long, but upright, tall, proud. His mane, ruffled by the wind, caught the morning light like fire, and for a moment, he looked eternal. Elias's hands trembled. He raised the camera instinctively, but then lowered it. Some moments aren't meant to be captured, just witnessed. And then, like a shadow learning to dance, the lion moved, slowly at first, then faster. A stride, a bound, a run. Across the red dust, Tao ran, not like an animal rescued, but like a king reborn. And yet, as his figure disappeared over the ridge, something inside Elias ached. Because when something you love runs free, you never know if it'll ever return. Elias permanechu ali por horas, sentado na areia, o olher perdido na derecho mq desaparecera. Neo havia mais pegadas. O vento do Kalahari ya começava a apagar os últimos rastros da jornada daquele animal. Mas o que o leo dixu, neo podia ser levado pelo vento. Elias nunca foi o tipo de homem que se achava especial. Fazendeiro simples, de fala mansa, mas acostumado com silencios do que com discursos. E ainda assim, ao olhar para o horizonte vazio, ele sentia algo que nunca havia sentido antes. Não era orgulho, era reverência, porque havia algo sagrado naquela história. Não só pela vida salva, mas pela vida que ambos haviam resgatado. Tao foi salvo da morte, sim, mas Elias foi salvo da ausência, do peso de ter perdido tudo. Sua terra, sua mulher, sua fé no mundo. Aquele animal, com os olhos queimados de sal e a alma partida, havia devolvido algo que Elias não sabia que ainda podia recuperar o sentido. Ver aquele leo cor de novo livre, inteiro, era como assistir a uma prece sendo atendida sem palavras. Uma prova viva de que nem tudo que está quieto está acabado. Que mesmo o que parece destinado ao fim pode, com cuidado e coragem, renascer de jeito novo. E se isso é possível para leo no meio do deserto, talvez também seja para nós. O vídeo que Elias havia gravado, com mãos trêmulas e coração apertado, viralizo sem que el sequer tentasse. O mundo viu Tao. O mundo viu elas. Milhões de pessoas se emocionaram com aquela cena crua e verdadeira. Comentários vinham de todos os cantos, veterinários, mães, soldados, professores, crianças, Gente que nunca se interesu por historias de wildlife e, de repente, corva por animal que mal conheça, mas talvez o que me surpreendeu alias no foi a fama repentina, nemos pedidos de entrevistas, foi o silencio que se quebrou, passos que estavam caladas há anos como querem falar, contaremos sobre suas perdas, suas dores, suas tentativas de recomeçar. Como se aquele leo tivesse tocado algo que dormia dentro delas. E nesse novo movimento, alias entendo uma verdade que talvez só quem vive no extremo consigo enxergar. Quando voca escolhe salvar uma vida, qualquer vida, voca nunca salva só o outro. Voca se salva também. E essa escolha, essa coragem, essa compaixão silenciosa, pode se espalhar como fogo lento, capaz de transformar eto solo meserido. No fim, alias no sub se tal voltaria. Mas, por algum motivo, ela acreditava que sim. Talvez no hoje, talvez no amanhã. Mas quando o mundo mais precisar lembrar que esperança ainda existe, rugido poderá ser ouvido outra vez. How many times do we pass by something, or someone, on the brink of collapse, and choose to look away? What Elias did in that desert wasn't just an act of bravery. It was a reminder that we always have a choice to ignore or to act, to stay safe or to care, even when it's messy, even when it hurts. This wasn't just a wildlife rescue. It was a collision between two wounded souls, meeting at the edge of the world, and deciding not to give up on each other. And now I ask you, how many Taos are out there right now, struggling in silence, waiting for someone to show up? How many Elias are walking through their own deserts, thinking they have nothing left to give, until life offers them a second chance disguised as a broken creature? If this story stirred something in you, you're not alone. This channel is a space for stories like this, real, raw, and life-changing. So if you believe, like we do, that true connection between humans and animals can change lives, subscribe. Because these stories matter, and they deserve to be heard. And who knows, the next time life puts you face to face with something wild and fragile, maybe you'll be the one who chooses to kneel down and offer water,